It's hard to enjoy reading something when you're dreading picking it back up. The worst scum of the earth characters. There's no difference to the outside world between a good guy and a bad guy behaving like a good guy. In fact, I think God loves that second guy a little more. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I have some recent reads that I have not yet talked about on the channel, and I thought I'd give you guys a little update. So full disclosure, I gave all of these books 3 stars. So they weren't super mega bangers for me, but most of them are pretty popular books, so I thought I would also scream into the abyss about them. Martyr by Kaveh Akbar is about an Iranian-American man who immigrated to the US after his mother's plane was shot down by a US military plane that mistook her passenger airplane for a military plane. So she died a martyr's death, and this causes our main character Cyrus to become obsessed with the concept of martyrdom. He is also a poet and a recovering alcoholic. So a lot of this deals with him grappling with the death of his mother and obviously the struggles of his addiction. And then, his obsession with martyrdom and wanting to also die a martyr's death. I love Kaveh Akbar's writing. There were some nuggets in here that were really, really good, but there was just something about this story that left me wanting a little more. I didn't feel fully satisfied at the end. I annotated a lot, but when I was looking back through my notes and what I wanted to read for the video, there weren't actually a ton that I wanted to choose from. He's definitely an author that I will keep an eye on, but this one just wasn't the total hit that I wanted it to be. It did, however, have a fantastic opening paragraph. Maybe it was that Cyrus had done the wrong drugs in the right order, or the right drugs in the wrong order. But when God finally spoke back to him after 27 years of silence, what Cyrus wanted more than anything else was a do-over, clarification. Lying on his mattress that smelled like piss and Febreze, in his bedroom that smelled like piss and Febreze, Cyrus stared up at the room's single light bulb, willing it to blink again. Willing God to confirm that the bulb's flicker had been a divine action and not just the old apartment's trashy wiring. A year and a half ago, in early recovery, Cyrus told his AA sponsor Gabe that he believed himself to be a fundamentally bad person. Selfish, self-seeking. Cruel, even. A drunk horse thief who stops drinking is just a sober horse thief, Cyrus had said, feeling proud to have thought it. He'd use versions of that line later in 2 different poems. But you're not a bad person trying to get good. You're a sick person trying to get well, Gabe responded. Cyrus sat with the thought. Gabe went on. There's no difference to the outside world between a good guy and a bad guy behaving like a good guy. In fact, I think God loves that second guy a little more. Booze worked that way sometimes, clarifying, briefly, what his mind couldn't. It was like sitting in the optometrist's office, booze flashing its different lenses in front of your face, and sometimes, for a second, it'd be the right prescription. The one that allowed you to catch a glimpse of the world as it was, beyond your grief, beyond your doom. That was the clarity alcohol and nothing else gave. Seeing life as everyone else did, as a place that could accommodate you. But of course, a second later, it zoomed past clarity through a flurry of increasingly opaque lenses until all you were able to see would be the dark of your own skull. What about you though, Cyrus Shams? If you become a martyr, won't you be hurting the people who love you? Cyrus nodded. Of course, he said. Then after a beat, but it's hard to figure out if that hurt would be worse than the hurt of my being here. So I don't want to totally dissuade you from reading this if you're interested. It wasn't a total waste of time, but it also wasn't the total hit I wanted it to be. The Dinner by Herman Koch is a totally random pickup, but the synopsis intrigued me. So this is about a pair of couples who go to this dinner. The 2 men in the couples are brothers. This takes place in Amsterdam, and there's this sense of the dinner is very performative, and throughout the course of the novel, we're like, why is this dinner so tense? What is being unsaid here? So I do feel like this was really tense, and then as the dinner progresses, we learn more about this awful event that involved both of the couple's sons. We're switching back and forth between the night of the dinner and the night that the awful event happened. So I feel like this was a really fun thriller. This is like pretty poorly rated on Goodreads. It's not doing anything extraordinarily new, but I did like the writing, and I think a lot of people who disliked this didn't like it because all of the characters are like the worst people you've ever read about, but I personally love reading about awful people doing awful things. I'm fine with that. So if that's something you don't like, you're probably not gonna like this. But even then, I don't think these are like the worst scum of the earth characters I've ever read about too, so I don't know. I mean, I also gave it 3 stars. Yeah, I mean, I usually don't annotate thrillers either, but there were a few lines in here that were pretty good, and that kind of resonated with me. Sometimes things come out of your mouth that you regret later on. Or no, not regret. You say something so razor sharp that the person you say it to carries it around with them for the rest of their life. Looking back on it, that Sunday was the high point as well. The novelty of living a life without guarded thoughts quickly wore off. Life became more constant, more muted, like a party where you can see everyone talking and gesturing but can't hear what anyone in particular is saying. No more peaks and troughs. Something was missing. You sometimes hear about people who have lost their sense of smell and taste. For those people, a plate of the most delicious food means nothing at all. That was how I looked at life sometimes, as a warm meal that was growing cold. I knew I had to eat or else I would die, but I had lost my appetite. This was 3 stars, but I'm keeping it, so use that information as you will. Okay, the next 2 are ones that I was so certain were gonna be 5-star bangers. These are ones that are like so highly lauded on booktube. These are authors that are so highly lauded. So I do feel like me giving these 3 stars was more of like a me problem. So the first one is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Was this like an impeccably written book? I think so, but there was just something about the writing that felt really hard for my brain to read and process. I'm not sure if this was the vibe that James Baldwin was going for, but there was something really unnerving about the writing in this. Like, I found myself dreading picking it back up again. And I think if that was purposeful, that was very well executed, but obviously it's hard to enjoy reading something when you're dreading picking it back up, you know? And yeah, there were some lines where I found myself having to reread, not because I was like, oh, I want to make sure I fully savor the beauty of this sentence, but more so that it was like, I didn't fully grasp the meaning the first time. But there were still a lot of very beautiful parts. I did annotate quite a bit in this. Sometimes in the days which are coming, God grant me the grace to live them. In the glare of the gray morning, sour-mouthed, eyelids raw and red, hair tangled and damp from my stormy sleep, facing, over coffee and cigarette smoke, last night's impenetrable, meaningless boy, who will shortly rise and vanish like the smoke. I will see Giovanni again, as he was that night, so vivid, so winning, all of the light of that gloomy tunnel trapped around his head. So I think that's a kind of a good example of like, that was beautiful, but like, dog, that was a very dense, complex sentence, you know? That's not like the easiest sentence to read. And I'm not saying that like every book I read has to be super dumbed down or anything like that, but I do just think that was a huge contributing factor to what decreased my enjoyment of reading this book. It's like I had to take the beauty with the struggle, which again is like kind of maybe what he was trying to do, because that kind of encapsulates the story a little bit. This story is really about experiencing like the highest highs of life and also the lowest lows, and how sometimes those points aren't always brought about by different events. It could be the same event or meeting one person that makes you feel both of those things. Love him, said Jacques with vehemence. Love him and let him love you. Do you think anything else under heaven really matters? And how long at the best can it last, since you are both men and still have everywhere to go? And if you think of them as dirty, then they will be dirty. They will be dirty because you will be giving nothing. You will be despising your flesh and his. But you can make your time together anything but dirty. You can give each other something which will make both of you better forever, if you will not be ashamed. If you will only not play it safe. You play it safe long enough, he said in a different tone, and you'll end up trapped in your own dirty body forever and forever and forever, like me. Somebody, said Jacques, your father or mine, should have told us that not many people have ever died of love, but multitudes have perished and are perishing every hour, and in the oddest places for the lack of it. Again, this is one that I really don't want to dissuade anyone from reading because James Baldwin is such a prolific, gifted writer. I do think it just comes down to he's not super compatible with my brain. If you've read this and I totally missed the point or am not looking at it from the right point of view, let me know, because I was very disappointed to not love this as much as everyone else did. Okay, and then lastly is kind of a similar story where I thought this was going to be a 5-star banger. So that is Lucy by Jamaica Kinkaid. This one was 3 stars for me, less so because the writing style was incompatible with my brain, and more so because this was not an easy character to read the point of view from. But again, I really do think that that was the point. So Lucy is about a teenage girl from the West Indies named Lucy who comes to North America to become an au pair for this wealthy white family. So I would say Lucy is probably the angriest character I've ever read from the perspective of. It's definitely something that's discussed and addressed throughout the entire novel. That's kind of the conflict that's happening throughout this whole novel, is the way that Mariah, the white mother, views life and certain aspects of life differs so greatly from how Lucy views those same things. It really boils down to the fact that Lucy comes from a colonized country, and now she has moved to work for people who look like her colonizers. And there is sort of that same pushback from Mariah, where she's sort of like, why are you so angry all the time? And kind of trying to absolve herself of any blame because, she isn't directly to blame for how Lucy's life was up until now. But Lucy really challenges her and tries to get her to see from her perspective and to at least understand where she's coming from. So I think that those conversations were really interesting, but it still was really taxing to read from the point of view of someone so angry. At the beginning of this, I almost DNF'd because I was like, wow, Lucy's really angry. She's kind of a bummer to read from the point of view from. And then the more I read, I was like, oh, I think that's kind of the point, because I have the luxury of, if I want to just stop reading because it's not fun to feel so angry all the time about everything, I can just stop reading and I don't have to be from that point of view anymore. But Lucy, that's her lived experience. She can't just stop living her experience. It's ingrained, it's integral to who she is, it's how she was raised, it's her background. And she doesn't have that privilege. She doesn't have that luxury of being able to shed that anger. And she shouldn't have to either. Her anger is very justified as she describes it. Unexpectedly, Mariah came up to me. The look on my face must have shocked her, for she said, "You are a very angry person, aren't you?" And her voice was filled with alarm and pity. Perhaps I should have said something reassuring. Perhaps I should have denied it, but I did not. I said, "Of course I am. What do you expect?" I remembered an old poem I had been made to memorize when I was 10 years old and a pupil at Queen Victoria Girls' School. I had been made to memorize it verse after verse, and then had recited the whole poem to an auditorium full of parents, teachers, and my fellow pupils. After I was done, everybody stood up and applauded with an enthusiasm that surprised me. And later they told me how nicely I had pronounced every word, how I had placed just the right amount of special emphasis in places where that was needed, and how proud the poet, now long dead, would have been to hear his words ringing out of my mouth. I was then at the height of my two-facedness. That is, outside I seemed one way, inside I was another. Outside false, inside true. And so I made pleasant little noises that showed both modesty and appreciation, but inside I was making a vow to erase from my mind, line by line, every word of that poem. Mariah, do you realize that at 10 years of age, I had to learn by heart a long poem about some flowers I would not see in real life until I was 19? As soon as I said this, I felt sorry that I had cast her beloved daffodils in a scene she had never considered. A scene of conquered and conquests. A scene of brutes masquerading as angels and angels portrayed as brutes. This woman who hardly knew me loved me, and she wanted me to love this thing, a grove brimming over with daffodils in bloom, that she loved also. Her eyes sank back in her head as if they were protecting themselves, as if they were taking a rest after some unexpected hard work. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't my fault. But nothing could change the fact that where she saw beautiful flowers, I saw sorrow and bitterness. The same thing could cause us to shed tears, but those tears would not taste the same. We walked home in silence. I was glad to have at least seen what a wretched daffodil looked like. Mariah says, I have Indian blood in me, and underneath everything I could swear she says it as if she were announcing her possession of a trophy. How do you get to be the sort of victor who can claim to be the vanquished also? I now heard Mariah say, well, and she let out a long breath full of sadness, resignation, even dread. I looked at her. Her face was miserable, tormented, ill-looking. She looked at me in a pleading way, as if asking for relief, and I looked back, my face and my eyes hard. No matter what, I would not give it. I said, all along I have been wondering how you got to be the way you are. Just how it was that you got to be the way you are. Even now she couldn't let go, and she reached out, her arms open wide, to give me one of her great hugs, but I stepped out of its path quickly and she was left holding nothing. I said it again. I said, how do you get to be that way? The anguish on her face almost broke my heart, but I would not bend. It was hollow, my triumph. I could feel that, but I held on to it just the same. This is a very important read, very intense, very angry. I annotated a lot, but it wasn't a 5-star banger for me, unfortunately. So those are 4 books I don't want to dissuade you from reading, but that I only had 3-star experiences with. So you can like this video if you want, comment, let me know if you've read any of these. Did you have a similar experience reading these? Did you have a better time? Did you have a worse time? What else are you reading right now? Let me know. I'm always taking recommendations. You could watch my other videos if you want. You could subscribe. Would love to have you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.